Martin, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, man. I've got so many smart questions to ask you from the conversations we've had over 15 years. Actually, they might not be smart. Let's just call it questions. I've got a few questions to ask you over the 15 years or so I've known you. But the first one I want to ask about is the Mandalorian head behind you.
That's
What's
right.
the story there?
So I decided I wanted to kind of get back into Lego just for a bit of fun. Almost like mindfulness and yeah, making heads out of Lego. Like there's a fair bit of detail behind it that you don't see. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I just when I finished it, I went, "You're here forever." And I like doing the helmets, but yeah, I just really enjoyed kind of going back to I suppose my late early teens is when I gave up on Lego, and just I've done a bit for the kids when they were like wanting something instantly at Christmas. But yeah, just really just building something like that for myself. It just brought me back some happy memories, and yeah, really enjoyed it. I'll do it
Mm,
again.
mm,
Seemingly there's a lot of adult Lego for adults, so I'm I want to go with I like Star Wars and I love the Mandalorian. I just thought it was such a really smart way for the Star Wars brand to branch out and do things that we haven't heard. So all these backstories, just
mm,
love them. So I really
mm,
enjoy
mm,
it.
mm. All right. Well, I think I want to come back to mindfulness, Lego, and backstories. It feels like there's a few themes there
There's a bit.
that we can
There's a bit.
explore. Almost certainly. I wonder if that's what the ancient Greeks and Romans were doing when they were making busts. They were really just doing an exercise in mindfulness. It wasn't art. They were just contemplating the next philosophy.
Yeah. Well, the one that always blew my mind. Nothing's really ever affected me the same way is when I went to Newgrange in Ireland, and saw a monolithic tomb that was predates the pyramids by 3,000 years.
Hmm,
Out and every winter solstice, the light illuminates the entire tomb.
hmm,
And how did they get that right?
hmm,
Like,
hmm.
the test window wasn't that great. Like, how long did it take them? What was their motivation? Who even came up with that as an idea? Like, there's so many levels, and it's from if you ever get a chance to go to Newgrange, maybe it's different as an Irishman, but like there's something about it where I feel a bit of belonging, and I just think it's from a culture perspective, I think it's just amazing, and even it's like the symbolism and what I really connect. So I kind of found out about Agile before Agile because the Celts have a huge kind of affinity with interdependency,
Hmm,
and the Celtic knot has always got no end or start. You can't find a start or
hmm,
finish it, and even drawing a knot is an art form,
hmm, hmm,
and I just really loved seeing that kind of mindset to there's a more complex future
hmm,
than the one that you can think of, and that goes back a very, very long time.
hmm, hmm,
And before I originally kind of when I was going down this path, I co-wrote an article with Mike Cohen, and I called it the the art of chivalry for Agile, and it was going back to the Knights of the Round Table and looking at their oath of allegiance and principles.
hmm.
And really, when you look at them, absolutely all spot on for where we are today. Um, so I think when I look at those things, you kind of go, we're we're evolving, but we shouldn't forget what's most important. I
That
think
was the art of chivalry for Agile with Mike Cohen,
that's
and
right.
you said you explored the principles. And did you say quotes of allegiance? Is that what you said?
The oath of allegiance of the Round Table.
Oath. Sorry, oaths of allegiance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the old Irish accent kicking
yeah. And so it's my hair going in my ears means I
in.
can't hear properly anymore. So
Yeah.
bit between us. I
kind of
find that fascinating. Just for shits and giggles, I picked up a book. It's historical fiction on Stonehenge, actually, and Newgrange was one of the research topics for this book. I know we're talking different different places and different countries, right? But I find that fascinating. So if it's three, actually, I'll go back. What that made me think of, and this is going to sound very woo woo, was a deep reverberance with ancient history and some of the stuff that hasn't changed since, let's go, 5,000 years BC. There was, in fact, as I say it, there was tribalism, and there was worship, and there was um, rites of passage, and a lot of around animals and pets actually comes to my mind when I was reading about this stuff. So even when you're talking about Newgrange there, and again, I don't think it's because you're Irish; it's probably because you're predisposed to think that. But I would also love to go to somewhere
Yeah,
like Newgrange and check it out. It would be deeply moving. How could you not? So is it 5,000 years? Is that what we're talking about, or
3,000 years
7,000 now?
before. Yeah, it's pretty old.
It's like
I think it
7,000
predates
years.
the pyramids by 3,000 years. Is the bit that I remember as a stat, but like I could be wrong. We can agree it's
Uh,
old.
let's not let stats get in the way of a good conversation. Um,
Exactly.
so principally we're here to talk about agile, and we're here to talk about lean, and we're here to talk about our own methodologies and what you've seen of our work. But we can explore any of these things. And so we can meander our way back. I'm fascinated by the fact that you said Celtic knots and interdependency. Was a stimulus for you to consider
Yeah.
agile, and talk
So
to me
you
about
know what?
that.
So in Agile they have a concept called the definition of done, and the idea of the definition of done is that you're not finished until I'm finished. We're kind of like in this together. So for me, 1 and 1 no longer equals 2,
Mhm.
and 1 out of 2 isn't a half; it's 0. And what I found is that kind of interconnection that you were making to work meant that even if I'm finished, I need to have a duty of care to your work. If you ask me for help, I should be willing to help you. And like that sense of cooperation that should come from that, for me, that reminded me just so much of in the Celtic knot, the more overlays in the knot, the stronger the symbol is. And I just felt the way I interpret it is that the many times we help one another, the stronger a team is.
Mhm.
And yeah, for me, the connection, like I loved Celtic knots. I've got a tattoo of one. I just brought that together and joined it together in a way that went, I can really identify with this. And there's a lot of old, it's in every kind of folklore. There is some kind of learning around, you know, do not unto others as you wouldn't want to do unto yourself. Like or them to you. Like I think um it's just a sense of kind of what does cooperation truly mean?
Mhm.
If and I always the way I see it is like as a consultant that I am interdependently related to every single client I have
Mhm.
because their sense of value, I have to see as valuable.
Mhm.
And if they don't see value in me, it's going to be very hard that others will see value in me. So
Mhm.
I found that we do have to have an independent view of value in any business relationship.
Mhm.
And for me,
Mhm.
I just was able to join that back to the strength of a Celtic knot
Mhm. Got it.
and how am I, all of those overlaps are like feedback loops.
Mhm.
I want to strengthen my symbols wherever I can.
I mean, there's a few themes to explore there, but without overlaying the complexity of all human nature, just for a second, you can answer that question next.
Mhm.
We'll just start with business and teams. you know, I love this. And I remember actually sitting opposite you and talking about these themes, all the way back at SMS. So we're talking lifetimes ago, not even, you
Yeah,
can't measure it in years. it's lifetimes with the experiences and adventures and misadventures. So these things, you're not done till I'm done. 1 out of 2 is not finished. It's a 0, I heard. And the more a team helps each other, the stronger the overlay, thinking of a counter reinforcing. And the last thing is, you asked the question, what does cooperation truly mean? I'm fascinated by that. Like, what does it mean, and why are, in my view, we're getting it so wrong in business and teams. There's so much that I see. Maybe I'm getting cynical. I don't know, Martin. I'm not as fresh faced as I once was with this stuff. So my question is, what does cooperation truly mean, and why do so many people get it wrong in your view?
I think a lot of people try to maintain distance by calling everything a transaction or a handover. I don't hand over anything. I try to deliver value, and that has to be, evaluated rather than I've handed it over, it's done. I mean, it's like saying I finished a project, I'll never question its benefit. So I think a lot of times we try to oversimplify things to try and create distance. I do this, you do that. I'll start when you're finished. Thank you very much. And I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring people together through, we talk about cross-functional teams or just, a high-performing team. It's a group of people coming together that will create greater sense of value than individuals working individually. In fact, individuals working individually just requires process and management to try and maintain it, and how much prescription is required. I find when you're working with complexity, I can't prescribe because I don't know what's going to happen, but at least we can talk to first principles. And one of those first principles should be that I'd be willing to help you under the assumption that if I asked you for help, you'd say, sure. I don't, that's all I need. And cooperation, as it's defined, says that I'd be willing to do that twice before I wouldn't do it again. So it's called a reciprocal dependency. I can only reciprocate so many times before you need to. And in cooperation theory, seemingly the magic numbers too. If I do 2 things, and when I ask you to do something, you say, I haven't got time, I'll never do a third. And I think that's for me, that's how I've simplified cooperation. Would I be willing to do something for you under the assumption that if I asked you, you'd say sure?
So is that where cooperation goes wrong? That reciprocal dependency isn't honoured in your average organization?
And for some, it's not even started. It's like, whoa. Let's not. I'm paying you, so let's change this around. This is what I expect from you, and this is what you're signing up to. That idea of, an organization creating a strategy or a plan or an estimate and turning it into a transaction, saying, well, this is what you have committed to. Well, there's so many things that could make that commitment non-committal. Parallel projects, lack of infrastructure, lack of capability, capacity, dependencies on others. The list goes on. These are so many system dynamics that I have to trust when I say sure up front. I'd rather try and figure it out with you as we go. But also, I think one of the other things they talk about in cooperation theory is that they call it enlarging the shadow. Like one of the reasons why I would never want to screw you over in business is because I value our friendship and so much. I do like to work with you, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to sacrifice that. So I see a longer shadow. It's organizations who are chasing the bottom dollar of the next quarter, the next dividend. Do they enlarge the shadow, or do they just stay shallow? Why? All I need to do is get the next 21 cents in the dividend, and I'm done. So I think that short time and short term thinking destroys cooperation. it's what we've seen as businesses start to look towards sustainability and resilience.
Mm-hmm.
How did they create a self-reinforcing loop of value, of survival?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think for me, I am out of a Celtic knot. Well, it drew a lot of things together for me that I believed, and then I was able to kind of connect, like Axelrod's mindset and cooperation with uh, I'm trying to think of the guy who the army guy turning the ship around. His name McAllister. His book together. Like I just so I found it was true, that kind of center. Whenever I've read books and I've been able to kind of take a bit here and a bit there and turn it into me. And that's that seems to be what always draws me to something.
Again, we've only got like an hour. We could do 10. Maybe we should do several, and we'll get
Yeah,
to the
and we're
opening
not
thing.
even
We'll
drinking.
get to.
Man.
No, I know, right? Well, I've got a Guinness on ice to celebrate once we've got off the phone. We haven't even got into Australia's innovation index, but we'll get there in a second. And I really mean this because I mean I find this valuable, and then the point is I want to share this thinking
Yeah,
with others, right? And I don't have all the answers, but you remind me of this, that every generation thinks it's the inventor of a philosophy, but it's a rejuvenation of an existing
yeah,
philosophy. And we talk about enlarging the shadow or short-term thinking over sustainability and resilience. Even as you're talking about those themes, I'm like, maybe it's visceral and logical, and are those two things the same things? One's cellular, one's
mm.
cognitive. I don't know, but what I'm saying is you're triggering me. I'm going, oh yeah, that's kind of obvious, but I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean, like, it makes sense. But I'm like,
But it has to be made explicit in business terms. You
mm.
like
But
you
hasn't it been?
can't.
This is my point. Hasn't it been explicit in business terms for decades with Cadbury and
No,
Leverhulme and
it, le-
places
it
like
left.
that?
I
They
think it
talk
left in
about
the
this.
90s when we tried to become more efficient. So I think as we try to automate a lot of what we do and make it linear and sequential and predictable. So we took a lot of process, tried to watch it, and then just copy it on mainframes. I think we try to simplify business to what can be automated,
Mhm,
or you know, we try to simplify process down to anybody can do it. So I don't have
mhm,
to hire skill because anybody should be able to do it if I spell it out enough.
mhm,
So I think that's level of standardization and codifying business. I I did I do think it had legs in the 90s because I think there was efficiency gains to be had. But once the internet became a thing, and
mhm,
once a mobile phone had significant CPU power, I think the game changed altogether.
mhm,
And I think we have to go back because we're more, to your point, like our networks are are tightly coupled now than ever before. And the best example I always remember is when Target had to do a massive recall of stock because
mhm,
a woman put a Facebook post on saying, "Thanks, Target. Went to your shop today. Come buy anything because I don't want to dress my daughter as a prostitute." Total stock recall.
mhm,
And the amount of kind of, I agree, hooray for you. And it was the
mhm,
first time I saw that social media and social intelligence is actually going to dictate business, not
mhm,
business marketing telling you what you need that you never had before.
mhm, 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 mhm,
I mean, really, the only corny ads these days are the car ads. Like, buy
mhm,
this car, and and that they try and give you some really fancy verbs of fabulous, amazing, empowered. You know,
mhm,
in the end, it's a car with four wheels.
mhm,
Um, I found, yeah, that there's CSIRO said that the average intelligence of a customer today is significantly higher, And main reason for that is the access to information. And
Mhm.
we know that information doesn't necessarily have to be true to be seen as to be true.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that. Access to information is driving up the average intelligence of a customer.
Yeah.
Um, um, I wonder if access to information is driving up the average wisdom of a customer. Because, again, my cynical nature I can't help but feel that we have all the information to hand, and yet we still make bad decisions. Let's just, this is a longer conversation here.
Sure.
I have access to all the knowledge in the world. If you go back to let's go Stoic principles. I've got access to all the knowledge in the world. I mean, yes, it's subjective to an extent because it's human created knowledge. Um, do I have the wisdom to use it well? Do I have the courage to use it well? And do I have the ability to use it in moderation? And I really think societally we're struggling with some of this stuff. I think I really do.
But we are.
And maybe that's one of the problems.
But I think the problem is that we're not trying to solve the same. Like what the things that you were trying to tackle today are completely different to what you were trying to tackle 5 years ago. Like
I'll say.
you're, where I'll give you an example. Government has a policy on data that didn't exist 5 years ago, like the open data policy, which has created countless opportunities to do something with it that hasn't been thought of. When you go to businesses today and you say, I don't think you asked this question, but like when you're delivering value for another organization, most of those problems you don't say, "Oh, I did this 10 years ago." Oh, yeah, we're just doing the same thing we did 5 years before. You know, you're always trying to do something, if not better. Or sometimes it's for the first time. And the other thing is that the organization you're doing it for is trying to differentiate in a more competitive and more global market than ever before. So the points of differentiation have to be even more on point. So I think,
Do you
these are
think
the things these are the things that cause us to be humble to not knowing. So I mean, the thing we should get better at is listening to our errors. In fact, turning error and turning listening into something which is habitual, which is really what feedback loops are. They force us to listen even when we're not ready for it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe it's my layman's understanding, Martin, but I was thinking that I acknowledge the problems might be different to what we had 5 years ago. I'll just make this point that I'll come to a question for you. I acknowledge some of the problems that we are solving, like open data, you just said, are different. Global competitiveness, I understand it's different. Unpredictable things have happened in the past few years, plus some, bad stuff in Europe. I understand, but I guess I'm overwhelmed by the repeated methods, the repetition of methods. And you just said, actually, it's really great. We should turn error and listening into something habitual. That doesn't feel like new wisdom. It feels like ancient wisdom. It feels like just and I acknowledge.
Sure.
But I guess what I'm thinking about is it's like we're recutting the words and the knowledge in a different way, which back to my point. Every generation thinks it's new, whereas I don't think it is.
So I mean, there's Bob Keegan talks about it requires age and experience for you to truly embrace and accept complexity, right? So like the level of conservatism in in uh, in software, or sorry, in university graduates today is significantly higher than when we went to college. But that
Why
doesn't mean
that?
complexity has reduced.
So when you say
Your
conservatism is
acceptance
higher,
of but your acceptance of complexity is also to do with life. But the 30-year-old version of you and the 25-year-old version of you, but had a different attitude. So I think we have to be a little bit careful that some of our cynicism is because our level of self-awareness, our our level of being comfortable in who we are in our shoes, that we like, we're not really going to change them a whole heap. We're just trying to figure out how we live and survive and thrive in this world. It means that we're more open to feedback than we were when we were 20 something. And I know I am. And
Mm.
I, yeah, but I didn't know any, I know I didn't like having to work in an outsourcing software body shop.
Mm.
It bored the pants out of me.
Mhm.
But I didn't know what else there was out there. I just had to, like,
Mhm.
I took a risk, took a chance, and I found
Mhm.
myself working in the mobile phone industry. Like I gave up my Y2K bonus to move
Mhm.
into the mobile phone industry in '98, and never looked back. It was the best move ever.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
loved it, absolutely loved it. And that sense of, we didn't know what the competition was doing, never mind what products to sell.
Mhm.
You just, every day, you just wondered what was it going to bring. So, um,
Mhm.
and it's the same when it came to complexity. Like I used to just try and fix problems I was good at, until I realized I'm also good at fixing problems I don't have an answer to. But I didn't choose that. That I had to have a couple of chaotic moments in my career for that to become something that I felt was a strength. So
Mhm.
I think, yeah, I think you have to think about all of that experience that you've developed. You can turn it into cynicism, or you can just turn it into, it's not even common sense. It's just experience. And
Mhm.
I think the experience drives greater levels of humility to
Mhm.
what we don't know, rather than arrogance.
Mhm. 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 Um, yeah, I feel like there's maybe a better word than cynicism, and I'm reflecting on what you're saying. I think I chose the word, by the way. You didn't put it in
Yeah,
my I chose the word, and I can't recall if I applied it to myself or somebody else, but I do. So I'll reflect on that more deeply, but just, I just want to come back to that Y2K moment, and I want to talk about, you mentioned timelines of 5 years and so on and
yeah.
so forth. So here's a question that I have, and at last I'm getting to a question 40 minutes in that I wanted to ask you. So here we go.
There you go.
Um, so, what are you doing different today to what you were doing 5 years ago? And do you have the prescience to know what you're going to be doing in 5 years different today? Can you see a logical arc that you're following?
Mm. So I think what I'm doing different today than before is I really have stopped trying to just lift and shift something I did somewhere else onto somebody else.
Mm.
And so there was a lot of times when I was listening to a customer problem, I really did go in with the attitude of, I've done this before. Let me just quickly find this for you,
Mhm.
and really just regurgitate a PowerPoint that I've got from elsewhere. And what I've found myself doing more is really trying to create the leadership cohort, taking a sense of ownership on what it is I've been asked to do. So, for
Mhm.
example, at the moment, I'm doing a revolutionary kind of change of mindset using digital tools to a retail supply chain. And I'm talking
Mhm.
about fabric and blocks and dresses and knitwear and 365. I've never spoke about these things before, but I didn't have to be an expert in them to be able to facilitate what is the right solution. And it was, I come with ideas and I've come with techniques, but I don't bring them up front saying I am an expert in Agile. I don't
Mhm.
even know if Agile is the right thing. I don't even know what part of Agile would be the right thing. So I think I've become calmer at being able to hold a discovery rather than rushing to an answer. Someone once gave me a piece of advice and says, and I said, how could I be better agilist? And they said, learn to count to 50. And because they thought I came up with an answer way too quickly. And I think I've now figured out how to do that. But asking a question that's difficult, not to catch someone out so I can give an answer, but for it to sit with people and kind of to discuss. I think I'm more comfortable with that. I read a book on dialogue by David Boone on this, and I think his book changed my life, but I don't think I turned it into practice till I went out on my own, because I could always hide behind another brand. I can't hide behind any brand now. It's my brand. So I think I had to change my style there. As to what I'll be doing in 5 years, I'd like to think that I'm going to continue down the path of focusing more on executive coaching and I would call it, strategy execution. Some people would call them strategic programs, but really, I think my space is when I'm working in an area which is uncomfortable to many and the first for the organization. I think I'd like to do a bit more of that. I don't think I want to be. I don't think I want to work for or grow to a large organization, because I don't like the stresses that comes with. And I like I'd like to think that the cooperative model that I'm using at this point in time, I'd have a few others on board with me in working in that manner. And I think that's it. I'd love to say I've written a book, but that's where I think I might be just getting aspirational then. But I would love to at some stage have a go.
I read, I'm just going to pick up something you just said, and it is themed. I read something today, and I'm not going to get this verbatim right, so forgive me. But I found the word interesting about stress, and give or take, and this is my own version of it. Stress is caused by the attention between the way it could be, the way it should be, and the way it is, without the ability to change the is. And I was thinking of my own. I read it. I think it was on LinkedIn. I mean, that great prophetic place, LinkedIn. It
Oracle
was
of all
something.
knowledge.
That's right. Well, there you go. The knowledge is available. The wisdom to do something about it is different. I can't recall if I said this before, but you're making me think about it now. I think I'm less certain and less comfortable than I've ever been in my career in some things. Like, there's just a void of possibility. But the fact that I would do this with you and others like you, and people tune in and explore, and it says to me that perhaps that my comfort is it's not better, it's just shifted.
I am. So I don't know if sometimes you wonder if you just make this stuff up to kind of survive, but I've now got a new belief system, and I find that when I'm feeling stressed or anxious, I consider it a form of intelligence. My body is telling me I need to slow down, listen more carefully, not prejudge or react, and slow my breath down, look at my surroundings. I've got all of these kind of senses that I can leverage in the workplace when I feel anxious. And to some extent, I'm really grateful for them. Like, I was presenting to a CEO and a CFO and CTO all at the same time, and my heart rate had gone up to 115. I just checked my watch, went, Jesus, this is what's happening here. And and I could have gone up to 130 if I panicked about 115.
Mm.
What I what I the way I translated in my head was, well, this is where you're probably going to have to shut up and do more listening, and when you answer to the question, not to what you'd put on a slide. And I ended up breaking the sequence of my slides because I had to follow the conversation, not the one that I was trying to control. And I mean, I could have tried to ignore my body, but I felt by at least acknowledging my heart rate was 113, I was able to turn it into a source of power. And I was sitting down. It's like, this is weird. Also told me that the conversation was important to me, so I didn't want to fuck it up.
Yeah, I think it feels like I'm not sure I would have ever gone into these conversations. I mean, I would have with mates around a beer, but maybe not that deeply actually. And this is a public conversation, but it's sort of normalized by almost everybody that I would listen to and look up to, in terms of communication circles and deep thinkers, and they admit to those feelings of anxiety and stress. And I quite like that reframing of it as a measure of intelligence, or a form of intelligence. It makes sense. Honestly, I said this before. I'm like 1,000 meetings in a year this year. It's crazy, right? The amount I'm doing. And when I'm one-on-one or one-on-two, this conversation comes up very frequently. Actually, it doesn't matter the level. So it's not only a public figure, but it's the people I do business with. I observe if I was in a boardroom, though, presenting on whatever, I wonder how accepting and acceptable that elevation of heart rate and a moment of, now let me just hand over for you while, you let my body, I'm acknowledging my body and I readjust. And it's a thing that I figured that I've struggled with rather because, people, so I'm an extrovert on the extrovert spectrum, but not on all things. I was restudying this recently. There are some areas where I'm deeply introvert. I need time to think and process. Like I always want to be the last to introduce myself, and that tension for me is just not what people see in me. They don't think that I'm that person.
Yeah.
So in a room when I'm presenting, people always expect me to lead off and go first, which I absolutely despise. So before we even get started, my heart rate's up, and so I guess where I'm going with this, it's so normal. And in everyone's circles, it's accepted, but it's not necessarily acceptable in certain scenarios, right? People don't
I think,
accept it.
I mean, the other thing is that, and I've seen someone do this before. They started everything by, oh, I'm super nervous, and they didn't show a single point of nerves. And after the third time they said it, I was thinking that this is just their game. They say this because they must have worked for them once, but they're not. They just say it every time. And I remember someone saying to me, "Do you think he's nervous?" I went, "No, yeah, I think it's a bit of a game. I think." And so I think there's an authenticity that you, in order to maintain, you can't say it all the time. But there'll be a certain point in time where you kind of go, I think I could be a little bit more vulnerable today. And I remember doing a keynote on how I was dealing with my mother's dementia. And, that kind of fear that everybody gets, which is, I wonder if it's hereditary. And is this, am I looking into my future? And that was a tough thing to kind of talk about. And it opened up to kind of how I've just really kind of had a second thirst for learning, because learning keeps dementia at bay. So I'm learning Gaelic. I started jiu-jitsu mainly to go into a place where I was truly a white belt who knew nothing. And I loved it. So, I mean, if I started every PowerPoint presentation with a connection to my mother, I would be insincere, and I don't think it would be the right thing to do anyway. But I definitely know when I used it in that moment, I meant it, and I definitely haven't gone on to use it again in every keynote or in any other keynote. It's in one, and it'll probably stay there. So I think we have to, there's times where we can be vulnerable and authentic, and there's other times where we just have to kind of use it to kind of self-monitor and self-assess. And I just think trying to do the right thing for somebody else is the best way I can figure out what to say and what not to.
I think that I mean, the person you're talking about introducing themselves says they're nervous. I come back to knowledge and wisdom. People, it's probably actually I have a dichotomy. The first thing I go, my cynical side is, well, they're probably not being truthful, knowing it gives them a bit of an out, and and maybe it's an empathy or sympathy play. I don't know. But the second part of me goes, well, maybe they are, and they're just better than they think they are, and they've done it so many times now. It's automatic, but it's really hard. But the problem, as you say, it causes an incongruency, right? And
yes,
at what one level or another, it doesn't work. I dislike it too, by the way, because when it comes up.
So I've always not wanted to be that guy, and let's call him Fred. So what I've tried to do is just try and, in the end, if we're always trying to add value, one question that you can ask yourself, is this valuable? And I think, and like you can't always win. You can't always win an argument. You can't always win the next contract. You can't always be the right set of services for somebody else. And maybe if I've given you the answers where you go, I choose not to use you, that's valuable to both of us, because I won't have the anxiety of trying to pretend to be someone I'm not, or deliver in a way that I'm not capable. And to date, I haven't had to sacrifice that, because there's enough value in the market where I'm still valuable to someone.
Which is great.
By the way, it's the kind of the affinity that I had with Sparta.
Our work, Sparta.
Yeah. That, I always feel that some of the language on it could be slightly different, but it's valuable to some, or it wouldn't exist. And also, I think it comes from a very genuine intention of trying to add value and be different. And I think anybody who's willing to put their own time to try and codify, or at least say, this is my point of differentiation, I mean, it's worth the time to listen. So when you exposed me to the Spartan model, that's kind of what I picked up on. It was a point of necessity where it originated, and now it's trying to be used as a standard within your organization, within Thunder Labs. But then it's trying to go one better. Is it more valuable to others as well? Who knows? But you put it together on a website, and you've told people about it, so it's out in the open now.
You're touching on an interesting point there, Martin. I want to credit you something. Since you said to me a couple of weeks back about minority influence, it's come up without exaggeration 50 times in terms of the way that we position our work and the way we're thinking about it, and the expression "pushing shit uphill" comes to mind. When you I don't even want to say in a zealous way advocating something, because that's not us. But so mountain influence, which you put me onto, I've really been thinking about and using.
Yeah.
The second point about Spartan, and I'm not cynical about it, because it's okay. It's just an interesting observation. that it doesn't really matter if you're. This is my experience. It doesn't matter if you're trying to um, add value, and if it's valuable, and if you're trying to do it authentically. It, you know, it matters to me personally, and it probably matters to my friends and those that, let me in, so to speak.
Yeah.
But adding value, and being authentic in the pursuit of those things, in my ripe old age of 46, is proving to me to be, it's a bit of a lottery whether that gets you ahead. Because when I look at other businesses, and I'm looking at people in the eye, I don't care if it's big enterprise or small
Yeah.
business, it's rare to find people that have that, that, that line of thinking, and yet they're
Mm.
successful,
But you
which
could
makes me
always work
think,
for them and just say,
I
I'll
don't
do it
want to.
10% cheaper, right?
Just, and what, sorry,
And
10% cheaper?
yeah. So, I mean, I think the point of origin of how the Spartan became a thing, and what it is today, was one of those kind of minority groups that you were attracted to, and it was being done in the right way with the right reasons, trying to get away from all of the bastardization of Agile XP and cynicism from those who felt that they were being lied to, when probably were, when someone sold them something that didn't make sense. So, and saying, hey, let's not be that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you wanted to grow faster, you would have been better off growing with something that people already liked, and said, I'll do 10% cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
Could have, it's a race to the bottom, but you could have at least been in a race. Whereas what you've
Mm-hmm.
tried to do is create a new world.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the language you use, the examples that you have is what some people are going to like and some people aren't. But you can
I
always
just
go back
want
to 10% cheaper if you really wanted to.
That's not going to happen.
No,
I'm
it's not.
too belligerent for that. It's like, all of us. It doesn't really matter who the thinker is. All of us want to be significant and to be loved. Behaviorally come down to that.
Mm.
And individually, I might want to be seen for who I really am, good and bad. And I think organizationally, I want the people that I work with to be seen for who they are, good and bad.
And that's my logic of enlarging the shadow.
Mm,
That that's the growing of shadow. That's the growing of partnership. That's the
mm,
growing of being considered in partnership.
mm,
All of those things.
mm. I'm with you. I mean, I'm obviously a convert at the Church of Martin Kearns, and
Yeah.
you sit around with. I know I'm going to see you this week. You sit around with some of those guys and ladies that are going to come out, and you're going to feel that in a large group of them. I guess it's, how
Yeah.
do you have that blossoming of wisdom turn into momentum? And I'm not sure it's an age-based thing. I think it's a time thing. Maybe
Oh,
it's
that's
age,
something
but
different. And that's where the other thing, and so this is where my other element of Irishness kicks in. So one of the things I love about the Irish culture is a concept called the Shanachie.
Mhm,
And basically, the Shanachie was a professional storyteller.
mhm,
And they went from one house to another looking for to be fed and bedded, and in return they'd tell you stories. So they
mhm,
were kind of like seen as famous to some extent. Anyway,
mhm,
it was the way in which a lot of old Irish folklore got passed down before we
mhm,
had literacy. So the there was a woman by the name of Lady Gregory who tried to capture some of these stories to make sure they never got forgotten, as the Shanachie kind of became less popular it turned from Shanachie to kind of storytelling comps.
mhm, mhm,
In what we call a feshkill, they have a storytelling comp. Anyway, when she put together that book, she had this amazing quote, and she said, "The stories of yesterday are like a deck of cards. You'll play your hand as you see fit in the conversation that you're in."
mhm,
So the way I've interpreted that is that I have got good stories of where I've added value elsewhere,
mhm,
and I'm not sure what combination of cards in my hand I would need to use to reach across and connect with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I just try to have as many cards in my deck.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, sometimes I just need to remember what I did before and not forget it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think the one thing that I can always do is just to kind of remember to record my success stories as cards.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the size of the deck and know when to play them in whatever life puts in front of me. So
before we jumped on this call, I had quite a stressful conversation about something, and I'm going to use two things that you've given me in today's conversation in the stuff I got to deal with tomorrow.
So I'll just give you a real example of where this is kind of like weird for me. Was I decided to become a scout leader, kind of because I just wanted to do something with my two younger kids because after that they're all kind of grown up, and so we've done scout leadership with them. And I learned something in scouts, and it was called an I can statement. And I applied that in a multi-million-dollar organization in a process through a set of I can statements. And I only thought of it because I saw how it empowered a scout to think differently. And I was just trying to get a process to think differently. Obviously, they were different I cans, but like just even writing I can and something come after it and saying, can you do that? You get a yes, no answer. Well, I already know where I need to train. So I think we can, there's lots of things that we do in life that can, and that's where I think the work-life balance, I think it has crossed over. Like, I think I learn as much from home, bearing 6 kids, about how to work is the same way as I've gone to work and learned how to be a better dad. So, so I think the deck of cards can have many suits. They're not all business.
Yeah, I understand the wherewithal of when to play those cards. A bit like Fred that we were talking about early on. The wherewithal of
He
what
just has
card
his
to play
favorite
and
one.
when.
Play the Joker every time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, man, it's a really great analogy. Actually,
Yeah.
I do like
Lady
it.
Gregory. I can find the book if you want, and I'll give you the actual quote. But it wasn't mine. But
A Shanachie and a Feskel were the words you said.
Feshkill Ardesh. Feshkill was this. So I'll
Listen,
send. We're talking Gaelic. I'll send
yeah,
you.
I know, right? Please send it to me. Don't get me to pronounce Gaelic.
Yeah.
A couple of hopefully you can give me a bit more time, because I just want to and maybe the sequence is out here and the way I'm asking these things.
We didn't know where this was going to go, so
well, we could, and I really mean this. I'd like to double back on a few points, and we can explore more. And you've got some time with Andrew, which I would love you to take, just on Agile specifically. And without it being as easy to say that, and when I say easy, reciprocal dependencies twice, without it being that, you can't have that answer. Why does corporate Australia struggle with Agile, or why are we struggling with Agile?
Sure. So corporate Australia, I think, has had a very easy time of things, and from from my research, it connected to when Australia succeeded during GFC. So there was a lot of views that was because of procedure and regulation, and the other part is a lot of organizations have grown in Australia just because of population growth. So you tie those two together, I think people were achieving their targets just by those alone. Now, I think since then, our level of innovation has reduced, and as stated in the Innovation Index, and CSIRO do a really good paper on this on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't a need to do anything different, and we had such strengths in commodities, and we could live off them for 200 years type of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
We're now so I think we got a little bit complacent.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we found is that like our entire global economy can be disrupted on halfpenny these days, and the need to pivot is becoming more important. Even though yes, we probably have coal for another 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we'll be able to burn it because I think it's ethically it'll be turned into something which we'll be judged by. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so and I think there's things like that are happening, and I'm not all for not using the resources that we have, but they'll come with consequences that others will have to live by. So as a result, we have to think about it now. You can see that just in the amount of solar panels that are being put on houses. Some people argue that they're equally as pollutant, and other people would argue they're not they don't big of a saving as people go on about. But you can see every couple of houses now they're popping up, and they've been supported by those who've purchased them because they say they're good. So we're going to see a connected customer and a customer who cares about a sustainable future, especially as the age demographic shifts in most in most countries. Such as I heard recently that we're going to have more people over 65 than under 18 for the first time ever in about a year's time, or we've just made it. So these are seismic shifts. And I think, how do we shift with them? It won't be by doing the same, and it won't be by working any harder, because I don't think we can. I don't think that's a problem we have in Australia. Everyone works as hard as tough hours, tough jobs. Like I don't see that in Australian culture. People work damn hard here.
Just acknowledge the themes in which you're talking about. There's another 2 hours right there, Martin. The question is, why is corporate Australia struggling with Agile? And we talked about
so then Agile,
we talked about complacency, but
yeah. So I should have, yeah. So the short answer is, Agile is hard work, right? Agile doesn't solve any problem. It just shows you where your problems are and asks you what you want to do with it. Agile evolves to suit the need and your risk appetite. That can only happen by constantly assessing and judging, is this working, what we need to do differently. So that level of governance is tighter. That level of kind of feedback loop is essential. The solutions will emerge over time, which means nobody can tell you and just follow them. And that's tough. Some people, where am I going to make the time for that? And I think that's the key to it, is adapt. You use Agile because there's a greater purpose. You need to adapt to have greater levels of resilience, to be more sustainable business, to have a new product line. Whatever it is, Agile is the enabler to that, but it's hard work. I think a lot of people looked at Agile as a silver bullet, a quick win. Just copy what someone else has done. It'll work for us just like it did them. And I just don't think it works that way. The way that Agile's helped some corporate achieve a point of differentiation and a value in 2005 to 2010 type of time frame. Yeah, that's not common. And lots of people left Suncorp and have tried to apply the Suncorp model and didn't achieve the same results. And even Suncorp didn't keep going.
People companies have tried to apply the what model? The Suncorp model, you say?
So basically, so the first real successful scale in Australia was under Jeff Smith and Suncorp, and lots of people have tried to lift and shift that wherever they went. And even Suncorp didn't keep it. They forgot about it and had to, they left Agile and have now come back to it. Like there's with a shift in CIO. So there's it's hard. It takes effort,
mm,
and it's a constant maintenance.
mm, mm.
You have to make
Good.
space in your calendar to make agile
Mm,
work. It won't
mhm,
just work naturally.
mhm. Is there a um, accidental interpretation of how it should be done, of what the agile is supposed to be, and then is there also a subversive interpretation of what people think should be
Sure.
done? Do people intentionally, actually, if I go, there's if I think there's subversive, there's accidental. Accidental is just like um, well-meaning but doing it wrong. Subversive is intentional, and I think there's a third category maybe, which is like a subconscious subversion.
Sure.
Like it's the avoidance of success,
Yeah.
just for whatever reason. Like, what do you have any views on that?
Yeah. I think the best example would be the attitude to documentation in Agile. Some
Mm-hmm.
people would say there's no documentation in Agile,
Mm-hmm.
and any documentation is waste.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what Agile said. And one of the things that Agile said um, within Crystal was the risk to a person's life has a proportion to the amount of documentation you write, called
Mm-hmm.
safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then a lot of people just turned Agile into a rebellion, and
Mm-hmm.
and they so hated writing meaningless documents that no one was ever going to read ever. It was kind of like you can go and get stuffed. We're the rebellion. We're fighting the cause, to the
Mm-hmm.
point where then a purist will go, any document is bad. We don't do any of that. And that was never the case. It's the same as people saying, yo, man, my code is my document. Well, glad you're not writing software for a nuclear reactor. But, so I think or, education, like you might be able to create it, but how do you sustain it? Well, others have to be educated onto how to use it. And
Mm-hmm.
not everything is as seamless to learn as an iPhone. And even
Mm-hmm.
I'd argue that I don't even know half the functionality of an iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
I reckon I could be better off if it would have a few tips and tricks. So, so I
Mm-hmm.
think that for me, there's every single part of the manifesto. People replace the word over with instead of, and it was always meant to be a bit of a balance.
People replace what word with what word?
Over with
Mm.
instead of. So,
What's the context of over and instead of? Like, what do
so
you mean
in a
replace it?
like if we working software over comprehensive documentation,
Got it.
working software instead of comprehensive documentation. It was never meant to be that. It was meant to be about balance. The word over was in the center to create balance on each axis.
Mm,
And I think
mm,
that was a, I think that was it was very intentional when it was put together.
mm,
And I feel that we've lost that along the way. And
mhm.
some people have
Yeah.
turned into a rebel of you can go and get stuff to the upper management. And that's not
Mm,
Agile was not meant to be that either. It was about the right thing for the customer. It meant to be the right
mm,
thing for a sustainable product.
mhm,
It's the reason why we use the word
mhm,
product over project.
mhm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think there's a few themes that I'd like to revisit. Almost my brain is imploding with things now I need to hang up to you and take action on straight away. Um, friends of mine are in organizations. They're responsible for delivery. They have a mixture of agile or waterfall or
Sure.
something else. Whatever the mocking name might be applied to the environment. Um, they're mostly good people. In fact, they're all good people because they're my friends. So of course, they're good.
Mhm.
If there was advice on how that they could move towards, you know, I'm going to go
Agility,
back to somewhat. Sorry. Oh no.
moving towards
Well,
agility.
I don't know. I think that I think you've convinced me that agility is a tool and not always the
Yeah, it
answer.
is. Yeah,
Um, no, but you said something about it was a personal reflection, but I think it does apply. Sustainable and resilient
Sure.
execution. You made me think about organizations as a whole. They're not
Yeah.
most people I deal with aren't zealots or purists or academics. They're practical people, but I think they do need a path. So if you were to guide people towards sustainable and resilient
Sure.
and highly likely to execute, like what would you say? What would be the parting words of
So the,
wisdom?
so the first thing is that you can't have a resilient system if you don't have the feedback loops to kind of to guide you. So if you don't
Mhm,
stop and assess, you'll never be resilient. Resilience is based
mhm,
off feedback and then figure out what to do. It's not like a,
mhm,
so you really have to have a discipline in wanting to stop to make sure this
mhm,
is still working. For example, I always say that every process should have an expiration date. It just
mhm,
doesn't work forever. So why don't we have to
mhm,
wait? Why do we have to wait till it's broken? Why can't we see the signs?
mhm,
And when you see those signs and your gut feel tells you this isn't working, it probably isn't, then you should ask yourself
mhm,
what should change.
mhm, mhm,
And waterfall can coexist with agile
mhm,
because as long as they're focusing on different problems, they have different traits. I mean,
mhm,
I think that's been a big one for me. That coexistence
mhm,
is what we're trying to work towards, not conquering.
mhm,
So, like, you should never um, use Scrum across your entire business. It makes no sense.
mhm,
But at the same time, you
mhm,
can't tell me everything should be Kanban or everything should be safe. It's,
mhm,
so I think you got to allow for, it's called purposeful governance.
mhm,
Allow something to become purposeful to a problem and then give it a name. Don't just lift and shift and copy a name because you think it makes it easier.
mhm. Purposeful governance, like it. Allow something to become purposeful and then give it a name. Love it. Um, right. Is there anything you'd like to, parting words of wisdom or question you'd like to
No,
ask me, Lily? You don't have
this has
to.
been fun. I'll watch it back myself. I've already, the thing about these things, you always kind of hit your head on a table and go, "Oh, what did I say?" Or, "Oh, that's not what I meant." But you got to. It's done now, so look
Dude,
forward to it.
I can't wait for round two. If anyone's made it this far, the intent for me now is to send it to you, Martin, and to Andrew as a prep or a warm up for a round two, which will probably get into more you know, the um, the parrying, and I don't want to say academic detail because you two are both pragmatists, but the practical detail um,
Yeah,
of of how this works, and the reason that I wanted to go ahead tonight, Martin, with this is, we've tried it a couple of times, known each other a long time, but we tried even on this just to coordinate around it. When people said to me I can't do it, I'm like, well, I'm going ahead anyway because it's stuff I learned that I can use, and people I know are interested in what we're doing around this, and I know it also feeds into the next trying to avoid any agile language, but let's go the next round, the next phase, the next evolution, whatever the right term is.
yeah.
But I really love it. I'm going to press pause. Martin, thank you for your time.
No
Appreciate
worries.
it.
Thank you for asking
I'm
me.